We had a little bit of tech difficulty as we were coming in, and things always pop up. And no matter how experienced you are in the tech world, I think we can all relate to that walk of shame when things don't work quite like they're supposed to. I've asked Nicole to guide today with the PowerPoint. And so plan B, we have to be flexible. You all know that. The last year has taught us one thing in particular. You cannot count on what you thought you could count on. So flexibility is our middle name. I'm Deb Fitzgibbons, and I am now here in Oregon. I have been here. This is the 5th year, coming to the into the 5th school year. I came here from the Midwest. I moved here from the St. Louis area. I lived in Southern Illinois. I have a master's in assistive technology. I worked at the community college level with learners from high school to 70 years old and helping them to find the technology to be successful at the community college level. I then went to work for a literacy support software as their trainer for North America, and teaching and training individuals how to use their tools. After a few years on the road all the time, I decided to go back to supporting learners face-to-face, and went to work for the special school district of St. Louis County. And I worked with 5 districts in computer access, and worked directly with helping teams to determine what tools kids would need to access curriculum. Then I moved to Oregon. I'm here because my son and his family live in Cottage Grove, and I moved here not really having a job. How's that for a leap of faith? But within 2 days of moving here, I was hired as coordinator for OTAP, the Oregon Technology Access Program. And shortly after that, I was given another statewide grant for regional and statewide services for students with orthopedic impairment. So sometimes you write the next chapter, and sometimes the next chapter of your life helps in writing you. And it seemed like all of these things were meant to happen, because here I am, and thrilled to share with you today. Move forward. As a disclosure, the work that I'm doing is really representative of the grants that I'm working under, and I'll tell you a bit about those in a moment. But I did want to say that I just had a book. I just contributed a chapter as a contributing author to a book. I am not trying to sell this book. It is actually free in Amazon as a Kindle download, but I did want to let you know that this is part of the work that I'm doing and bringing to Oregon, and partnering with Phil Maycomber, the author of this book, in bringing frameworks and trainings. So I wanted you to know that. If you did go on to Amazon and to order this, you would see, first of all, that it's not available in hard copy, a paper copy. Now that's different, because usually you can get a paper copy, but you don't necessarily have access to a digital copy. Many of you, if I said it's not available in paper, some of you would say, well, I want it in paper. How do I get it in paper? And you will have the option to do that through most of your life. Choose, do I want digital, or do I want the paper copy, something that I hold on to? And so we have that option as adults to say, what device do I want it on? Do I want to hold it? Do I want to mark it up? And so having that option as adults, I just wanted to talk about that for a moment here in relation to a book, because we all have preferences. And right now, it seems like the main preference, or it has been for years, is that here's the book. And now let's dig into it, when it is not always a preference for someone, and perhaps it's not always the tools that are going to help them to be most successful. So here's our first point: making sure that materials are available not just for those who have differences in access, but also in preferences. So if we move forward. So today, we are, of course, the title of my session is more about accessible educational materials and really expanding on what we are looking at as that tier 1 level of support. Whatever we call it, it's that first level, those things that we are giving to everyone and to help them to keep from needing to advance to higher levels of support. So what we are looking at first is making sure that we are on the same page for definitions. And oftentimes that's not the case. How many times do you go in and people start talking about acronyms and in education, you know, it's a world of acronyms. And you go in and nobody ever really defines or makes sure that everybody's on the same page before they move forward. So that's one of the first points that we want to make sure of. I'm going to go through the definitions and some of you are going to say, I already knew this. Okay, good. At least we're on the same page when we move forward. And I think we all know that's what we need to be doing in our classroom as well, making sure that we're on the same page and that we have frequent reminders of what that means. So we're going to be looking at the challenges to providing accessible materials. We're going to look at some of those universal challenges and then talk about how the universal solutions can help in providing supports. And we're looking at next steps. So moving forward, our agenda for today is we'll be looking a bit about the OTAP and RSOI grants because I want you to know what supports we can offer ongoing. Again, we'll be looking at that vocabulary. We're going to be talking about a learner profile that is used heavily in the world of assistive technology, but has application in for everyone. We'll be looking at the technology environment, and then we're going to be talking about what is it that you might need in the area of supports and training for accessible educational materials. Okay, so let's get going. Again, the Oregon Technology Access Program, OTAP, and RSOI, regional and statewide services for students with orthopedic impairment. Both of these grants are funded through the Oregon Department of Education, and both of them have been housed here at the Douglas Education Service District in beautiful downtown Roseburg, Oregon, for more than 30 years. We like to say that we're on the 35th year of a 2-year grant. So somebody must be doing something right. But we are, again, funded by ODE. The purpose, the total purpose, the sole purpose of our grant is to support you all and to support the teachers, therapists, administrators, parents, everybody who supports our kids. And typically, assistive technology is thought of as a tool for kids who might have disabilities. But again, we're going to expand our idea of what that includes. Our grant purpose is all about professional development within the educational environment. And so our topics are, of course, for therapists, but also assistive technology, augmentative communication, accessible materials, and something that I know you've all heard of, universal design for learning. So those are the primary areas that we touch on in our training. Move forward if you would. So training and professional development, both of our grants. Move forward. So in the 1920 year, just giving you a little bit of background on what we do, we send out newsletters. And if you would like to be added to our mailing, our database, please let me know. But we send out regular newsletters to let folks know what we're doing. Our newsletters in the 1920 year were viewed 82,000 times across 4 continents. We have a lot of people who are joining us from around the world. We have delivered in that time period 46 face-to-face and webinar trainings. More than 1,000 people attended those. We do give certificates for all of our trainings, and those come to you automatically if you need continuing hours. We have some statewide teams that participate every year for assistive technology. We also provide a feeding seminar for those who have complicated eaters. Everyone again gets credit for our sessions, and now we are recording everything and giving credit based on a comprehension quiz. So you can now view and get credit for all of our sessions in your jammies at home, if that works for you. Moving forward. So we do work individually. There are some things that we do because we look at patterns and trainings that everyone needs, but we are also happy to provide technical assistance and gear to your needs if you invite us in for discussion. We have a lending library. I'm going to go into that a little bit more. We also have a professional learning team from both of these grants that represent the different areas of our state. And they bring to us what are the common areas or common barriers in your area. Let's talk about it. We now have statewide town halls that we are doing for things such as our therapists, where everybody comes together. We invite those people who can listen and make change. And that's what is happening. We are making change. I'm proud of that. But if we would go to the next one. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about the loan library. Our loan library is for 45 days short term, and this is through OTAP, the Technology Access Program. So the idea is that you have access to some of the tools that you may not want to purchase or that you don't have readily available. So it gives you an opportunity to try things before you buy them. And so Brittany works in our department, and she's happy to answer questions. Also, in the folder of handouts today, I did include a loan agreement form that if you wanted to check something out, you just merely send that to us or send it to Brittany. You can view what's in our database by going to the webpage. We are housed with the Roseburg Library, so you can see our catalog there of what we have to offer. But this loan library is available to teachers, to administrators, to parents, to families. And so we have this, and hopefully you will be able to explore it when you have something you'd like to try. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of an idea of what is in our library. Some of the most common things that we get requests for, and this is particularly for the early childhood, but just giving you an idea. We have iPads that have all of the various communication apps, let's say, for instance, that you can check out and you can try them with your learner. For those who have difficulty accessing in the typical way, we have switches, we have mounts, we have tools for people to be able to access, even if they have control over as little as eye movement. They are going to be able to use eye gaze. They are going to have an option to try eye gaze. It's not for everybody, but these are the kind of things that we have available. You'll see here the Pen Friend, and I'm going to be talking a bit more about that. But the Pen Friend is one that is really popular that we have for loan. It really allows you to record supports onto worksheets, onto flashcards, those type of things, and it's really with a dot. And so you put the dot on your material, and then you're just going to be able to record whatever it is that you want it to say. This originally was created for reading for prescriptions, but it has lots of application in the classroom, something that you can check out. We just got 30 of these in, and so we have plenty. Feel free to let me know. We have switch adaptive toys for those kids, those learners who might have complicated bodies, who first need to learn about cause and effect. So we have lots of toys and the switches that go along with them. Wanted to provide you this just so you can see, first of all, that we have the loan library, and a lot of people don't know. And then secondly, to give you an idea on what kind of things we might be talking about. So there,
Debra,
yes, I do.
sorry to interrupt you. We
No, go right ahead.
had a question come in. If a family wants to trial an AAC device, does it have to be approved by a district SLP or AAC specialist first?
And the device, primarily the device that we are talking about now is the most commonly used iPad. That doesn't mean that we don't have other devices, but we don't normally buy those because they are such an individualized tool. So we would go through a process, if you hadn't already, to make sure that you are on the right track and looking at feature match. And then having said that, we do check items out for parents and families. And so what we do recommend is that there should always be a speech path involved in the conversations so that you are considering all of the features, are considering the best needs and the development of language to that often is speech path's area of expertise and is needed. We need somebody who knows technology, but also who knows how to use it in developing progression of vocabulary. So having said that, if you wanted to try an app, there is nothing that says that you can't call me and say, I've seen a lot about Proloquo to Go, this communication app. I'd like to try that. I could send that to you, just knowing that it may not be the best option. It's really best practice to have that support from the SLP. So you don't have to have it, but to make the best decisions, I recommend that you do.
Perfect. And related to that, Debra, was another question. How do teachers and families browse what you have online and request materials?
So if you go back to the previous slide, you will see that, let me go backwards one. You'll see at the bottom of this page, it says that the Roseburg.biblionics, maybe we can copy and paste that into the chat box, but that's how you can go to view the selection of what we have. And that is part of the Roseburg Library. You do not have to be a library patron. Just going in, it allows you to see what we have. And so then you can look at what we have to offer and then complete be able to complete the loan agreement. And so if you don't know what you want, you can still say on that box, looking to trial switches. Well, we have a switch kit that we can send you the whole kit that you can try. So I know you don't necessarily, everyone doesn't necessarily know know what they need. And so sometimes you're going to call and you're going to say, hey, this is what I need, rather than going through and looking, because we don't know what we don't know. But we are certainly here as technical assistants in guiding you. And if there are things that we do not have in our loan library, of course, we are always looking at ways to better support folks. So there you go. Did that answer that question? Excellent. Okay.
Thank you so much, Debra.
Sure. Moving forward, a couple of slides here. And all right. So again, we are a liaison with those who produce the alternative formats at the national level. We are a liaison. Facilitator is one of our biggest roles in bringing people to the right tables. Move forward, please. Okay, wanted to mention our conference. I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but we do have an annual conference that we put out. We are taking, it's open now for registration. There's a link here that we might also want to put into the chat box, but we have 3 wonderful days of sessions that, yes, our primary audience might be assistive technology and therapists, experts, but the topics that you will see expand far beyond. We have topics that have to do with supporting kids who are on the spectrum. We actually, one of our keynotes is the Gen Ed person. You may know Carla Wade. Carla Wade is going to be a keynote. We're talking about breaking down silos and partnering, and we have sessions that are across the board from application from earlier intervention all the way across the lifespan. So take a look at that, and it may be a conference that you've not been to before, but I think you're going to be pretty excited about some of the topics that we'll be offering. Moving forward. Okay, again, we have assistive technology teams. Right now, we're not able to meet with them, but we're offering a lot of professional development virtually. If you move forward. And we have several virtual networks that we are doing now in partnership with the folks at the University of Wyoming. The ECHO partnership started as a medical model at the University of New Mexico, but now is at University of Wyoming. We offer twice monthly sessions in the area of supports, and the schedule for our therapists is here, but we do a little professional development and then talk about somewhat of a case study in application to kids. So Echo Ties is one of the ways that we're providing professional development. Going to the next slide, you'll see that we also have Echo Voices that is twice monthly, that is all about supporting kids with complex communication needs. So augmentative communication. Moving to the next slide, you'll see that we also are getting ready to launch Echo AIM, Echo Accessible Educational Materials, which I know here we are a half hour in, and I'm still still working on making sure we're on the same page for definitions, but Echo AIM is going to support the work that we're doing through the Oregon AIM cohort. Moving forward. Again, developing common vocabulary. We always want to start here. Moving forward, you're going to see that the framework that I'm using is known as the PACT. And it follows the framework of learning, obviously. First, learning about single word vocabulary, moving to reading about those words in context, moving to writing about them in concrete visual form, and then into talking about them. So you will see that this is also the framework of the book that I mentioned to you earlier, because the PACT is a framework that I've been using probably for more than 10 years now, and I'm partnering for these ideas, but you'll see that color-coded, routine, people start to know the structures, and those are some of the key ways that we can help our learners to be able to know what the expectations are, so that we can reduce some of the cognitive load of having to figure, okay, what is it that I'm going to be doing next? So when we look at our routines and we start to help kids know what's coming up, then they can use that cognitive energy to learn about things rather than learn how I'm going to learn it. So routines are one of those things that really help us to make sure that we're including all of our kids. So we're going to start with a learn about, of course, color-coded green. Moving forward. Definition, AIM. You may know this one already. You may have heard of it. And the first one is the most common definition. It's anything, any accessible educational material that is technology-based or print-based that has an inclusion of the printed and electronic text. It's related to the core materials, and it makes them, I've highlighted the word, usable across the widest range of student variability. So in the past, whenever we talked about what is the material that you're going to be sharing, in the past, it was typically this. And is this usable? When we talk about access, I think we all know that for some kids, some of our learners of all ages, this might as well be a paperweight. So we need to have options for those students. Additional definition that comes from the Department of Justice adds that part there that I've got highlighted. Substantially equivalent ease of use. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about usable with substantially equivalent ease of use. So if we go to the next slide, this is our motto. Accessible means equivalent ease of use. So now if I'm in my classroom, I would take my definition. Of course, I could post it. If I am in a virtual environment, I could also have a document camera or an extra or additional phone to keep those vocabulary words at the forefront so that anytime we say it, we can take a look and see as a reminder of what the meaning is. So let's move forward. And so there are certainly laws around the provision of accessible materials. And really the basis is that it's in a timely manner and that it's equitable and that it all needs to be considered for all of our kids. To the next slide. And again, in a timely manner, our publishers are furnishing materials. We've got a number of resources for digital materials, but the fact is that it is a law and that it does need to be provided timely manner. The definition of that is at the same time as their peers. So we need to provide accessible, that is equivalent ease of use at the same time as our peers. So go ahead if you would and move forward. You see the question about specialized formats in the IEP. If you're working with students in an IEP situation, you'll see on the special factors, it says, does the student, and this is G looking down, does the student require one or more specialized formats? When we look at this, I think the wording leaves a little bit to be desired because it says Braille, large print, audio, but what it gives the impression of is that it's only for kids who are blind, and that's just not the case. So one of the things that we're hoping to do is the next time the IEP is open up to reword that so that it does make more sense. But right now, it is in the IEP, and for some reason, people are still not always considering that. I think we need some training there. If we move to the next slide. I want to take a little bit of a breakout. And so I'm looking at now, we have a group of some 18 folks, including us, I believe, but I would like to, I see that I have a question, and yes, I'm going to get to that in just a moment. I thank you for that. But we're going to have a bit of a breakout. I know that we have people across different age groups, and I don't want to signal out or separate age groups because I would like the conversation to include all the population. So what we're going to do is take a bit of a break. We're going to, I see we have a small group, so we may want to do maybe 15 minutes. Well, let's go ahead and start with 10. I see now we have 14 people. I think some people don't like to participate, and that's okay. But as soon as we go into our room, we're going to bring up the document that you see listed here. One spokesperson can write for the group, and we are looking at some of the prompting questions. Do you see that if you are working on an IEP or with a student with an IEP? Is it in your IEP? Because it's not in all of them. Is it in your current environment, that term? Is the definition one that you can embrace? As I go and talk to parent groups, AIM is not something that they have been using, but they say, okay, if this is what we want to get behind, then we can embrace that. So the first thing is getting on the same page. What does AIM look like in your world? And it's just a brief discussion. So when you come to this page, if I click on this Google Doc, it's going to be a doc that everybody can write on the same one. So you're all going to be going to the same place. first group, I will write under where it says group number 1. So we're going to go into the breakout, but before we do, I don't want to lose the question that you asked me, Neil. So can we read that aloud again, Nicole?
Yes, we can. So what is your process for adding new inventory to the OTAP collection of resources?
Well, the process is, first of all, if we have requests, sometimes when we look at the request, it may be that we have something comparable, that it doesn't necessarily need to be the exact same tool, but we really look at the request that we are presented with and try to figure out, is that something that most people are needing? Is it an individual case? So let's say, for instance, if there was a single or a specialized ORTIi device that wasn't on an iPad, we may contact the developer or the vendor for that and work out a loan situation through them, rather than having to pay for a $12,000 device for a possibly one student. And so we can work with our vendors to get things, but then we are, as I said, we're always looking at what tools do you need? And in the changing to the digital environment, that's different. And so as we look at that, our process is, you need something, call me, see if we've got it. And if we do, great. And if not, we'll consider, is it something that we should have? Does that help? Okay, thank you. Was there another question related to that, or did I answer it?
I didn't see any other questions.
Okay, so as we are looking at the time for this session it's over at 12:30, correct? Okay, I just want to make
that's correct.
Time, and with a small group, I like that we'll be able to have some good discussion. So let's go ahead, and this is the document. I can post that link also in the chat box. But let's go ahead and take a look at what's happening in your own world, and having just a little bit of discussion on what we have talked about to this point. And you will see when you get to that document that the directions are repeated and the definition is there. So putting that in the chat box.
Yes, and that's also accessible through the Google folder, correct? That's in the folder. So if they have that open, they can access it there too.
We are all muted when we come back into the session. So here we are. I'm muting myself. I know that our group has diminished a bit, and I also know how hard it is to choose sessions when you've got so many of them that sound very similar at the same time. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and ask for share out from the group for those who were taking the notes. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oh, well, you've been sharing yours. What I need to bring up is the group document. And so I'm just going to go ahead and continue and share that, just mostly because I wanted to show a couple of strategies while I'm there. So in group 1, I know that it was kind of hard to tell which group you should be, but the breakout sessions, we don't have a whole lot of notes here. So maybe you had discussion without that. But I'm going to call in my group, I'm going to call on Lauren. Are you able to see this spot?
Yes.
Okay. So Lauren works in SPED. And if you could just tell us a little bit about what we have here on our notes.
Sure. So just looking at my district, the term AEM is not used in my setting, but I can see indicators of the idea of making sure things are accessible for students is there. I am currently on a curriculum adoption team, and so I am bringing that term to the team and making sure that any materials we adopt have those accessibility features built in, so that we're not having to retrofit by using a separate device or having to use making sure it's accessible, basically. So we're not having to retrofit or take people's time. I think timeliness of accessible education materials is a barrier right now because it's not planned for. And so it's kind of like when the need comes up, that's when the systems that's when people work to acquire those materials. So that takes some time. So they're not getting them at the same time as their peers, which is really unfortunate. And so, as far as our IEPs, I'm in Washington, so we don't have, in our IEPs, it doesn't talk specifically about alternative formats. That section does ask specifically about a visual impairment, but not considering it doesn't mention other disabilities that might also need alternative formats for their educational materials. I think that's it. Oh, and rubric. I wanted a rubric for how to rate materials for accessibility.
And I told you, Lauren, and I'll tell everyone that that's coming. It's almost here. It's
All right. Thanks.
we have a rubric from the state. So thank you for that. Now, did you have anything that you wanted that was different in your discussion that you would want to add to what Lauren was saying?
Sure. So we do rate whether there is a section of our IEPs about whether students need assistive technology needs. And if we check yes for that, we actually have in our district assigned assistive technology specialists, and they provide us with a lot of the similar equipment that you have in the OTAP library, but it comes through them and it's provided on a more permanent basis. So if students trial it usually for the year or longer, they might have it their whole school career if they need it. And it ranges from everything to dedicated personal laptops to switch devices to interface. We have interfaces for appliances and switches so that you can like plug in something and have a switch plugged into the AbleLink box, and they can use the switch to turn on like a lamp or a fan or a blender or whatever it might be.
Environmental controls.
Yeah, environmental controls. We also use step talkers that are provided through assistive technology sometimes. We use touch chat in our OGCOM a lot more now. We used to use Proloquo to Go about 5 or 10 years ago, and that's kind of been phased out in our district. Touch chat seems to be more in line with some of the reading lessons that we do. And I've just noticed that that's a big switch, not just in Lane ESD, but in 4J in general. I see that much more frequently with the OGCOM programs on the iPad. So I recommend that one if you don't have that in the library, because I bet a lot of people would maybe check it out.
We do have touch chat, and it really goes, individualized. And I know you look at feature match for kids, and we're talking more about the technology to access the accessible educational materials. But some of our areas across the state do have great lending libraries, and then we have some that have nothing. And so to talk about equitability, we do need to have these areas and other supports, but it also needs to be beefed up. So what you're talking about, there's definitely a need.
Yeah, and then our AP specialists give us access to a lot of different educational websites that we don't have to pay for out of our classroom budgets. And I'm wondering if OTAP does any of that. Like, I don't even know if it's possible to like contact a company like News to You and like pay for a subscription that can then be shared on a lending basis with other people. But can you like lend subscriptions to online?
We can do that for some things, but it's on an individual, a subscription to something like News to You. I don't know that. What we have, with our apps, of course, is obviously be able to push something out and pull it back, but we haven't gotten there with some of the materials yet. But what I need to do now is move on because we've got a lot of things to cover in only 15 minutes.
Can I just say one more thing really super quick, if you don't mind?
Sure.
My wife and I made a website that I put in the chat called Educational Equity Now, and it has a bunch of free resources that you can use for like websites and reading programs, science and math, and it's completely free. So I just wanted to share that as another resource that people could use
Thank
too.
you. Thank you. And that's how, that's the power. It's bringing, people who have something to share and letting that word get out. It's all about the partnership. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. So let's go back to our screen. Again, we've got about 15 minutes and the discussion is awesome, but I wanted to be able to share a bit more with you. And so I believe the first thing that we have is just a couple of more definitions, and one of those beginning with the assistive technology. So when we consider that, it's really designed around supporting learners who have disabilities. So I'll go to the next one. And so,
Sorry, and I was muted. I am working on getting us back on track.
and so go forward a bit and go to keep going. Keep going.
So that was the next one.
Okay, so back to that. Okay, so that's the next one. Move forward one more.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And so this is the technical definition. It's probably one that most of you have heard of. It's something that's either made that way or is something that is used and repurposed to help someone to improve or increase or maintain functionality. So it's all about the function, not necessarily the disability area, but it's about the function and what that means in the classroom. So moving forward, we to the next slide, please. When we look at the big picture and we look at assistive and educational, well, right now, a lot of our tools are available for all kids. So in the past, if we said, we're not sharing, are we?
Yeah, let me try one more thing.
Okay, okay, now I can see it again. So think about assistive technology. Is it assistive if everyone has an iPad? Well, if we take that away from everyone who has use of it, and there is someone who can no longer complete the task, let's say it was writing. If I cannot complete the task without that tool, then for me, it was assistive. Even though everyone else has it, it needs to be listed in my IEP as a tool that I need because I don't have Plan B if everyone else's device is taken away. So go ahead and move to the next one. And so again, as Mal said, it is in the IEP for assistive technology, and this is pretty universal around the country, I believe. Again, Oregon is one of the few states that has alternative formats listed in their IEP. So moving forward, we know that many of our kids right now, if they need alternative formats and the book is not already available that way, we need to document them with what is known as, okay, it's gone again. I don't.
I can see it still.
Okay, well, it's leaving mine. Okay, I'm not sure what's happening. So it's not a new criteria, but it is if someone is not able to access the material in the traditional way, it does require documentation to say that the student requires it, that they cannot independently access the text. And so that is what print disability is. And until we always are mindful of buying the material accessible, we will still have the need to document and qualify people if they need something outside of the norm. So moving forward. Again, universal design is one of those things. And as Lauren mentioned, if we can start planning up front, then we won't have somebody that needs to run out of the classroom to make a copy or make something digital so that a student can type on it. It's really building up front and planning for universal design. Next slide, please. And so really universal means all. Again, green, color-coded, along with our organized system, but it means all of those learners. And now we're talking about heavy trauma for kids who are coming back to the classroom after being out for a year. But trauma is an influencing factor. We've got nonverbal communicators. We've got those who have difficulty with reading comprehension. And that one I haven't read here, the low self-esteem, is one that is so common whenever our kids are having difficulty and barriers in the classroom, being able to do what the other kids are doing. If someone is a non-reader, that you're not the first one to raise your hand. You're not the first one to want to be a model for others. I did a training in a prison at one point in Kentucky, and all of these grown men who were there, or many of them were not able to read and access education. So what happened? Well, they dropped out. And so I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen to everyone, but I think we're all familiar with the preschool to prison pipeline, and not only the self-esteem, but the ability to rise beyond that is affected when we put such limitations on our kids. So moving forward. Next slide, please. And so you've all probably seen the UDL guidelines, and let me just point out that whether we are talking about engagement, representation, or action, that first line for everybody is about access, being able to recruit interest and providing material and formats that kids can access for in their particular area of representation. Always about access to alternative ways to take in the information and alternative ways to demonstrate what we know. Moving forward, please. Why does it keep leaving my screen? No.
So this is the AAC, so augmentative.
Okay, and so augmentative communication, again, just making sure that we're on the same page for definitions. This is for those who are not typical communicators. And so this definition comes from ASHA, the Speech and Hearing Association, but also remembering that those kids who use communication need to be included in our routines and in our lesson curriculum for access. Next slide, please. So I put in a couple of slides here that are based on the SEEKS framework. And when we're talking about communication, this is just a good tool that they shared that I wanted to give you, because we do have folks who are at different levels of communication. And so this website is here, but this kind of gives us a little bit of before words, emerging language, and conversational. And if you go to the next slide, it will also help you in looking at, as a quick reference for providing instruction based on that developmental level. And it really has to do with communication. So when we're considering those who are complex communicators, this might be a good reference that you want to look at. Next slide, please. And so where do we begin? Well, here we are with about 10 minutes left, and perhaps we should have started there because we've already begun. We've been talking about the issue, the barrier of of people not having access to the material because it's not available in alternative formats. Let's move forward. And we always begin with high expectations. And this, as Lauren said, that some people are just coming around to the culture and the idea that if we give people the tools that they need, that they will be able to excel. And so we know that there is a puzzle to everyone. We are charged with helping them find out what the pieces are that need to make their learning whole. Moving forward. This is from CAST. Lauren mentioned this. CAST is a great source for information. We are partnering with them for our statewide project. But this just lists some of the barriers to online learning, including some of the areas for students, some of the areas about culture, and some of the attitudes that we need to come to overcome, the cultural sensitivity of the wide populations around our state. But I wanted to put this in because regardless of where we are in our state or in our country, these are some of the areas of barrier that have been identified that are universal. Moving forward to the next slide, please. This is where you're going to find some information, Lauren, about the quick guide, purchasing instructional materials and resources. So this is going to give you a bit of a checklist. Next slide, please. And this is another one for purchasing. So where do we begin? Well, we always hope that on that, the big picture level, that our folks are buying the materials, and it's part of the considerations. So this is guidance on what to look for. This is also a link here for purchasing. I'm happy to say that the instruction materials curriculum coordinator for the state is part of our team now and is also presenting at our conference. But Ajali Moore is fairly new to her position, but she has taken over and has really done some wonderful things in the area of state level purchase. So this is another one of those checklists that you may want to take a look at, Lauren. Moving forward, when we're looking at our kids, yes, we've got state level things happening, but then we've got that front line. What is it we're doing directly with our kids? Well, what we should be doing is setting the stage for growth. And when we look at social and emotional learning, all of these ideas are not new. They're kind of built into that, but we should be focusing on strengths and helping our kids to know what they need, write it down. We need to write it down when we figure it out. So we have a profile for this learner, but helping them to know what they need to be advocating for. So we truly need to be setting the stage, and it begins in our classroom, whether it's online or whether it's back face to face. These are some of the overlying or underlying themes. Next, please. So we begin in our classroom. We begin by knowing who our learners are. We begin by knowing where the barriers might be. When we look at our overall goal for the class, here's our lesson. Think of our kids. What are the potential barriers? If we plan up front and we look at the universal supports, and if we know we're going to have someone who has difficulty reading or someone who has difficulty turning pages, we do need to flip our thinking to say, let's don't ask our IAs to leave the room to go make a copy. Let's consider that up front instead of retrofit. Moving forward, one of the tools that we use in the world of assistive technology is known as the SET, that stands for Student, Environment, Tasks, and Tools. If you clicked on this link, which I'm not asking you to do at this point, but if you clicked on this link, you'd be able to see an example of a template for that. And it follows the template or the format of the IEP, but really it's not based on the IEP. It can be used for all kids, really looking at what are the barriers and how do we overcome them. Next slide, please. And so knowing who's coming, if I look here, I know what their likes are, their dislikes, their strengths. When we look at educational concerns, what you will see is that all of those that are listed here are ones that are typically associated with dyslexia. When we look at them and we talk about them one by one, time management, reading fluency, comprehension, yes, these are areas that our kids with dyslexia struggle, but it's also all of our kids in the classroom struggle on some level with most of these things. When we talk about supporting our kids and we focus on disability area only, we're forgetting that it is the function and what that looks like in the classroom. And many of our kids struggle with the same thing. Moving to the next slide. Many of our kids learn the same way as our kids who have dyslexia, needing extra time, not reading out loud, multimodal presentation, word banks, explicit sequential instruction. These things work for all of our kids. And so when we look at why are we considering universal design? Well, it's because the struggles that our kids have work with and the strategies work with all of our kids. If we create something that helps somebody with a disability, it makes it better for everyone. And so I realize that we are coming close to the end of our time. And if you would go to the next slide, I am presenting you with additional materials. We always hope that we can get through everything, and I hope the definition of accessibility is clear, but I wanted to make sure that you are also able to look at some of the challenges and some of the solutions that can come through the technology and through creating the routines and the structures in your class that promote accessibility. Moving to the next slide. Again, part of that set, looking at the environment. Moving to the next slide. And the next slide. You will see and be able to move through some of the tools that need to be in every classroom environment, and as a tool that is an option for all kids, so that it does not become just a tool for kids with disabilities. We know that some people need it and some people prefer it. So I'm going to go through these next couple of slides pretty quickly. Text to speech is one of those that helps a lot of areas. The next slide. In early childhood, again, going back to the pen friend, it may not be your text to speech reader inside of Chrome, but it could be your pen friend. Next one. Speech to text, giving alternative ways to express myself. Next slide. Captioning, we've already talked about that. It's not just for those who are hearing impaired. It supports a language. It supports those who are English learners. And so this is one of the first tools for universal design, is turning on the closed captioning. Next slide. Executive functioning, again. Some of the, many of the tools and many of the problems you're going to see is because we've changed environments, and what was working in the classroom may not be working at home. And now going back to the classroom, we need to help and model for our kids that support. Next slide, please. Next slide. And so this is a survey. Whenever people started going to virtual environments, many people had no clue what was already available to them. And our learning management systems, many people were buying them new without considering the accessibility. But this link takes you to a survey that really helps you to answer the questions and to be able to print out what is going to be a profile of your building or of your school, so that people know what is available and know what accessibility features are there. So I invite you to go and explore this, but all of the tools that we're talking about, Canvas, and Seesaw, some of our other tools have accessibility features built in, and some of them that people are purchasing are just downright inaccessible. So some of the things that we need to look at, move forward. I want to go to one that is just, keep going until I tell you which slide. Go again and again and again and again. Okay, it looks like we might have skipped over a slide that talks about the AIM, and I'm not sure where it is, but there are some websites on that last one that will give you resources for finding alternative material. The slide that I am not seeing is all about the AIM cohort. You can stop sharing your screen now if you would.
Sure.
The slide is in the slide deck in our presentation, but OTAP and the Oregon Department of Education have been selected or applied for Oregon to be chosen as one of 7 states nationally who are working currently through the CAST, the AIM Center, the Accessible Education and Materials Center on the East Coast. Oregon is the only state in the West We have developed a team, a leadership team that includes Gen Ed, includes David Putnam, who is all about the RTI, and he's on the leadership team. It is a look at accessible materials across all age groups. Please go to that slide, click on that link, and go to see what we've got going on. We have our leadership team built, and now we are choosing 3 districts to be part of the technical assistance grant. Your awareness is there. You know that accessibility should be considered. We here in Oregon are working and bringing all the right people to the table and presenting and sharing and training. And I want to make sure you know that these things are coming down the line. Please go to that slide deck and check out who is sitting at this table and look at some of the goals that we have coming up. And this may be new to you, but we are on board. We know that these are some of the solutions that are going to make a difference for kids in the classroom, in virtual learning, and in their lives. So thank you so much for taking the time. I apologize for any of the little technology glitches, but please let me know how we can support you, and get in touch with me if we would like to do additional training.